Imagine a supercomputer, right? It is crunching just massive amounts of data, running millions of complex processes, and hitting record-breaking speeds.
Right.
But, and here's the catch, its cooling fans are completely broken. The machine is just screaming, constantly on the verge of a total meltdown.
Yeah, that is a great way to picture it.
And according to this really fascinating piece of analysis by Dr. Ryan Baidia that we have today, that overheating supercomputer is, well, it's modern India. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here for this one.
We are taking a hard look at this concept called India's hidden cognitive tax. And honestly, this journey is going to fundamentally change how you view your daily environment, especially if you ever feel completely overwhelmed by sensory overload.
It really is a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Because the dual reality presented in the data we're looking at is it's striking. Like if you examine the World Bank figures, India is undeniably surging forward.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at one of the fastest growing major economies globally. I mean, they hit a 6.5% growth for the 2024 to 2025 fiscal year, with projections pushing 6.6% for 2027.
Which is massive.
Right. The physical infrastructure is expanding at breakneck speed, tech startups are proliferating all across the map, and the consumer market is just operating on this massive scale.
You see the cranes in the sky, the gleaming new airports, the expanding digital networks. But the moment you step out of like a sleek new startup office in a tier I or tier 2 city, you hit this absolute wall of relentless sensory chaos.
Yeah, it's visceral.
Blaring traffic horns, over-amplified advertisements, wedding processions, just blasting music out of nowhere, construction drills. And then you go home, turn on the television, and it is basically a shouting match disguised as a nightly news debate.
And that stark contrast really forms the core of our mission today. We are asking a pretty critical question here. How much creativity, original thinking, and, emotional health is a nation sacrificing to environmental disturbance?
Because the physical progress is highly visible, right?
Exactly. But this chaotic environment is silently extracting a massive, unmeasured toll on the human mind.
I mean, we usually think of a tax as a line item on a paycheck, or maybe a societal drag like potholed roads or bureaucratic red tape.
Sure, corruption, things like that.
Right. But treating environmental noise as an actual tax on attention, memory, and sleep, that requires a major shift in perspective.
It really does. It is an invisible tax. And the biology behind it is actually incredibly compelling. The World Health Organization classifies environmental noise as a severe health hazard.
Wow, severe.
Yes, linking it directly to sleep disturbance, cardiovascular issues, and this is the big one, impaired working memory and cognitive performance, particularly in children.
That is wild.
The human brain is simply not evolved to process continuous high-decibel disturbance without incurring a heavy biological cost.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Let's look at the actual mechanics of that. A car horn blares outside your window. You might not physically jump out of your chair, you might not even consciously think about the noise, but your brain still has to process it, right?
Precisely. The brain involuntarily registers that sound spike. It forces this micro shift in your neural activity to determine if that sudden noise represents a physical threat.
So it's an evolutionary reflex.
Exactly. And even if your subconscious instantly concludes, there is no danger here, you have already spent cognitive currency.
Wow.
Your brain has been yanked right out of whatever deep cognitive state it was in, forced into a defensive reactive state, and now it has to expend additional energy just to refocus on the original task.
Okay, so multiply that micro-interruption by like 1,000 horns, construction drills, and loudspeakers over the course of a single day, and you're looking at profound mental fatigue.
Immense fatigue.
But, and I want to push back on this a bit, if you ask anyone living in the middle of Mumbai or Delhi, they will swear they don't even hear it anymore.
Like the habituation argument.
Exactly. They'll tell you it's just the background track of the city. If people say, well, this is normal, I'm used to it, hasn't the brain basically solved the problem?
See, habituation is largely an illusion in this context. The mind does develop psychological calluses, sure.
Like learning to tune it out.
Right. You learn to shout over the din, to emotionally detach, to ignore specific frequencies. But that tolerance is merely a survival mechanism. It takes immense subconscious energy to maintain that psychological block.
So you're still paying the tax.
Absolutely.
Right.
Your nervous system is still absorbing the physiological stress of the environment, even if you aren't actively annoyed by it.
It feels equivalent to someone running on 3 hours of sleep a night for 5 years straight.
That's a perfect analogy.
They walk around claiming they feel fine, that their body has completely adapted to the lack of rest, But they aren't fine. They have just completely forgotten what it feels like to operate at optimal, rested health.
Right. They are surviving, but they are certainly not flourishing.
And what happens when a whole society is just surviving like that?
Well, the cost of remaining in that survival mode is what Dr. Bedia defines as the lost creative hours. When a society is trapped in a constant state of noise, the fundamental biological mechanism required for creativity is disrupted, because true creativity requires incubation.
Meaning, the mind needs time to just wander, to let a thought sit quietly in the background until it, bumps into another thought and sparks something genuinely original.
Exactly. Incubation happens when the brain is allowed to enter a reflective, inward-looking state. Continuous noise violently interrupts that network.
It doesn't even give you a chance.
No, it forces the brain to remain locked in an alert, reactive state, constantly scanning the environment for the next stimulus. And under those specific conditions, a society becomes incredibly adept at producing reactive output.
Right, so you end up producing millions of brilliant engineers, software developers, traders, medical professionals.
Yes.
People whose entire educational training is basically geared toward solving the immediate, complex problem placed directly in front of them.
But the environment becomes hostile to reflective depth. You severely underproduce the original civilizational thinkers, the philosophers, the patient teachers, and the foundational scientists.
Because they don't have the quiet space to incubate.
Exactly. Reactive output can drive a surging economy, but reflective depth is what actually builds and sustains a civilization. There is a vast difference between output and depth.
That makes a lot of sense. And, we tend to blame city planners for this. We look at the traffic density, the zoning laws, the sheer volume of people outside.
Sure, the external factors.
Yeah, but the sources point out something much more insidious. This cognitive tax isn't just leaking in through the windows. People are actively inviting it right into their living rooms.
That's a crucial point. The home is traditionally conceptualized as a sanctuary, right? It's supposed to be the one place where the cognitive batteries are recharged, where the brain can finally drop its guard.
But that's not what's happening.
No. Instead, the modern living room has been transformed into an extension of the political and commercial marketplace.
Televisions are left running for hours, just functioning as this aggressive, inescapable soundtrack to daily life.
And the content is intense.
Oh, it really is. You have nightly news debates that resemble professional wrestling matches more than actual journalism.
Right.
You have soap operas that normalize constant suspicion, emotional manipulation, and screaming matches among family members. Plus the ads. The advertisements are specifically engineered to be loud, repetitive, and psychologically intrusive.
And the fallout on the family dynamic from all that is severe. Children raise their baseline for what is normal, internalizing this background chaos as the standard state of existence.
Which has to weaken their developing attention spans.
Absolutely. And adults lose the capacity for quiet, nuanced conversation because the environment demands shouting just to be heard over the television.
Which brings up the elderly, too.
Yeah, the elderly, who desperately require a peaceful environment for cognitive maintenance, become emotionally tethered to these anxiety-inducing broadcasts simply for a sense of company.
There is a line in the text here, and it's still sitting with me. Here's where it gets really interesting. It argues that a family eating dinner while a shouting news debate plays in the background isn't just consuming information. They are, quote, absorbing a style of civilization.
That is a heavy concept.
It really is. Does a culture built on interruption train its citizens only to react rather than to listen? If you are constantly exposed to interruption and aggression in your own home, you're learning that the person who shouts the loudest wins.
Exactly. You're training your brain to react defensively rather than to actually listen and process someone else's perspective.
Which seems like a huge problem for a democracy.
It threatens the very foundation of democratic interaction. A functioning democracy relies on citizens who possess the patience to listen, deliberate, and weigh opposing evidence.
Right.
If the domestic soundscape trains citizens only for aggression and interruption, the broader civic conversation inevitably mirrors that aggression.
Which ties the noise in the living room directly back to the noise on the street.
Yes. Dr. Bedia characterizes this entire phenomenon as a profound breakdown of civic dharma.
Civic dharma. Meaning the duty and responsibility an individual owes to the shared public space and the wider community.
Exactly. When a driver holds down their horn in deadlocked traffic, it has ceased to be a safety device. It is just a broadcast of personal impatience.
Like, I am annoyed, so everyone else must be too.
Right. And when a neighborhood blasts amplified announcements for hours, Whether it's for a commercial opening, a political rally, or a religious festival, they are unilaterally deciding that their immediate agenda overrides the peace of the entire community. It is fundamentally a moral problem.
It's pure arrogance. It's the assumption that your personal urgency, your celebration, or your anger gives you the inherent right to physically invade the mind of every single person within a 2-mile radius.
Yes.
It completely ignores the fact that true freedom in a society has to be tethered to a responsibility for the shared environment.
A society cannot claim to be truly progressing if its citizens feel entitled to hijack the cognitive space of their neighbors without a second thought.
Okay, so if you're listening to this deep dive right now, you are probably hitting the exact same logical wall I did.
Which is?
If constant noise is shredding cognitive health, destroying the incubation of original ideas, and eroding civic dharma, how on earth is India still growing at 6.5%? How is the overheating supercomputer still crunching the numbers and driving global markets?
It is the great paradox of modern India. The growth is sustained by a few immense countervailing forces. Chief among them is massive, unparalleled social energy.
Like the demographic scale.
Yes. You're looking at a demographic driven by an ambition that is frequently forged in the fires of intense scarcity.
The pressure is astronomical. When you have an entire generation of parents who remember true economic hardship or a lack of opportunity, they push their children with a ferocity that is hard to comprehend from the outside.
Exactly. In that environment, education and professional success aren't just vehicles for self-improvement. They are absolute survival mechanisms.
And when public systems fail, the family steps in.
Right. Where the public infrastructure or state systems prove unreliable or entirely unpredictable, the Indian household acts as the ultimate buffer.
The family unit simultaneously functions as an informal welfare state, a private bank, and a relentless educational pressure cooker.
And when you combine that concentrated social energy with the massive scale of the population, the statistical volume alone guarantees that millions of innovators and professionals will successfully break through the noise.
And to break through that level of noise, they develop a highly specific cultural survival skill. The source refers to it as improvisational intelligence.
Yes, the ability to somehow manage.
From childhood, you learn how to navigate gridlocked traffic, work around sudden power grid failures, maneuver through Byzantine bureaucracy, and compete in exams where a fraction of a percent determines your entire future.
Your brain learns to bend, flex, and continuously improvise through endless friction.
So what happens when that talent goes abroad?
Well, consider the global expat phenomenon. What biologically and psychologically happens when you take an Indian professional, someone whose entire cognitive framework was forged in this crucible of unpredictability and noise, and you transplant them into a highly structured environment abroad.
Say, a quiet tech campus in Silicon Valley, or a highly regulated research lab in Europe.
Exactly. That survival reflex, that improvisational intelligence, it doesn't just disappear.
It's like an athlete training for a marathon at high altitude while carrying a 50-pound backpack. Their lungs are burning, every step is a fight against the environment, and they are just trying to survive the training.
Yes.
But the moment you take that backpack off and bring them down to sea level, they don't just run, they absolutely fly.
The underlying intelligence and work ethic were always present. But suddenly, a massive portion of their mental energy is no longer being actively siphoned off by the cognitive tax of avoidable disorder.
Right. The streets are orderly, the public systems function predictably, and the environment actually protects their concentration. But wait, I have to challenge this. Shouldn't India just celebrate this resilience? I mean, isn't that improvisational intelligence basically a superpower?
How do you mean?
Well, Silicon Valley is full of Indian CEOs and founders who thrive specifically because they learn to navigate this exact chaos. They don't panic when corporate structures break down because they grew up in a system where things breaking down was just Tuesday.
Right, it's a badge of honor.
Yeah. So why would we want to turn off the very forge that creates such incredibly resilient, globally dominant thinkers?
It is a very seductive argument, I'll admit. But the analysis provides a firm warning against falling into that trap. Achieving progress, despite profound disorder, is fundamentally different from achieving progress by design.
Ah, okay.
When a culture begins glorifying mere survival, it risks using that resilience as a permanent excuse for accepting failing systems.
I see. So if an incredibly determined student manages to pass the hardest engineering exam in the country by studying under a flickering, noisy street lamp, That is a testament to the student's brilliance.
Absolutely.
But it absolutely does not make flickering street lamps a sound national education policy.
Exactly. The fact that a brilliant entrepreneur can build a unicorn startup while navigating soul-crushing bureaucracy and infrastructural chaos does not validate the bureaucracy.
Right.
The ultimate goal for a nation shouldn't be forcing its best minds to flee to another hemisphere just to experience the silence and structure necessary to reach their full potential.
It shouldn't be a requirement for success.
Right. The critical question becomes, why must citizens constantly exhaust themselves managing friction that a well-designed system should automatically eliminate?
So if the answer isn't just fleeing the chaos to find a quiet lab somewhere else, how does a massive, vibrant, incredibly loud nation actually fix this? You can't just mandate total silence, right? You would kill the energetic soul of the country and turn it into a sterile museum.
No, you can't. The solution proposed is a radical rethinking of what a nation considers an essential resource. There is endless capital poured into physical infrastructure, the highways, the ports, the digital broadband grids.
Right.
But what is desperately required now is cognitive infrastructure.
Cognitive infrastructure, meaning building the physical and cultural conditions that allow the human mind to operate at its highest possible capacity.
Yes. It demands a complete paradigm shift regarding how silence is perceived. In hyper-competitive, noisy environments, silence is often viewed as an emptiness, a lack of productivity, or even a sign of irrelevance.
Like if you aren't making noise, you aren't doing anything.
Exactly. This shift requires recognizing silence as a highly productive, tangible national resource.
Because it's inside that silence where the student actually absorbs the complex material, where the scientist formulates the breakthrough, and where the family actually connects.
Precisely.
But implementing this cognitive infrastructure sounds like an absolute nightmare of cultural friction.
The friction is immense because you are challenging deeply ingrained behavioral norms. Take the actionable policies mentioned, like legally capping the time and decibel levels of public loudspeakers universally.
Near schools and hospitals, especially.
Yes, and enforcing it, regardless of whether the event is a political rally, a commercial opening, or a religious festival. Treating honking as a civic violation rather than just a cultural habit.
Wow. Taking back the public soundscape requires an enormous cultural shift. If you tell a powerful political party or a massive religious group that they can't blast a loudspeaker into the street, you are suddenly challenging who owns the public space.
Exactly. You're telling them their right to broadcast ends where their neighbor's right to peace begins. And building public reading rooms, quiet parks, these are physical manifestations of that shift.
What about inside the home?
The proposals extend into the domestic sphere as well, which is equally challenging. Establishing quiet hours within the home.
Like mandating no television during family meals?
Right? Eliminating background broadcast noise during study periods. There's even a push to evaluate media networks, not just on viewership, but on their civic quality.
Civic quality.
Basically asking, does the programming equip citizens with the tools to think critically, or does it merely train them to shout louder?
What I find so compelling about this is that the push for quiet, this demand for cognitive space, isn't some imported, sterile Western concept being grafted onto the culture.
Not at all. The civilizational roots are incredibly deep. The entire foundation of Indian philosophical and dharmic traditions rests on the absolute necessity of inwardness.
The rishi, the monk, the seeker.
Exactly. Their entire pursuit of knowledge is based on realization, not just data accumulation. And realization fundamentally requires undivided attention.
And attention requires restraint.
Yes, immense restraint, which is born from discipline. You cannot possibly hear profound civilizational truths if the society around you is engaged in a perpetual shouting match.
A civilization cannot survive on raw, chaotic vitality alone. That vitality must eventually be disciplined by wisdom and reflection.
Well said.
Which brings us to what this all means for you listening right now. Because even if you are thousands of miles away from the bustling streets of a Tier-I Indian city, the concept of the cognitive tax is universally applicable.
It absolutely is.
Think about your own personal cognitive infrastructure. How frequently do we voluntarily invite environmental disturbance into our own minds?
I mean, think about the open plan office buzzing with constant conversation, the endless barrage of Slack notifications, the group chat pings, the doom scrolling.
It's everywhere.
We are all subjected to modern environments that are actively hostile to deep work.
How often do you interrupt your own incubation of ideas? The common message we are unpacking today is that the next great freedom movement, whether for a nation of 1.4 billion people or just for you individually, might just be the freedom of the mind from unnecessary noise.
The necessary evolution from a loud democracy to a listening democracy,
Hmm.
moving past improvisational survival intelligence to achieve deep creative intelligence.
Establishing boundaries and fiercely protecting spaces for quiet reflection isn't a luxury. It is a fundamental requirement if you want to transition from simply managing the daily friction of your life to actually designing the life you want to live.
I couldn't agree more.
It brings us right back to our overheating supercomputer. You can possess the most powerful processor in the world, capable of incredible feats, but if you never fix the cooling fans, if you never let the system cool down, you will never discover what that machine is truly capable of achieving.
Right.
And that leaves us with a final, lingering thought for you to carry into your day. A question that builds on everything we've talked about.
Let's hear it.
If constant noise violently interrupts the incubation of our best ideas, and if the aggressive media we consume quietly shapes our civic behavior, could our modern global obsession with constant background noise, always needing a show on, always having a playlist running, needing a stream playing in the background while we work, be slowly, invisibly erasing our own capacity for original thought?
Are we individually choosing to impose a massive cognitive tax on ourselves simply because we have become absolutely terrified of our own silence?
A question that requires serious introspection from all of us. Find a moment of quiet today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.